Hello there. So I just want to start out by saying that, I've been reading everyone's posts on the discussion board and I've really enjoyed reading them. It's nice to kind of get to know you all as students, even if it's just for that little bit, considering this is an online course. So, I don't really get to see you all one-on-one. And since everyone posted on the discussion board, I thought, I'd tell you guys just a little bit about myself before I get started today. So as you know, my name is Amanda. I'm a graduate student here at UK. I got my bachelor's at UK in mathematics and my master's at UK in statistics, and I'm finishing up my PhD here, hopefully over the next year. I focus in what is called ecological statistics, so I look at things like animal populations and how long animals live, and so that's where my research is concerned. Now, I do want to take just a minute and talk about the course. A lot of people, when they first take this course, they think, oh, it's a math course. So a lot of people think, statistics and math, they're synonymous, they mean the exact same thing, and that's actually not true. Statistics, this isn't a math course. Now, as statisticians, we do use math a lot, and it's a tool that we use, just like physicists use math or chemists use math. We do similar things, but we are a separate field, so don't think of this as a math course. Really what the field of statistics does is it says, there's something that I would really like to learn about, and maybe if I can go and collect some data, how can I use that data to learn about the thing I'm really interested in? And so that's what we do as statisticians. And here later on in the course, you're going to start to see that, and we'll give you some examples of what we do. But really, the primary idea of this course is we want to talk a lot about what is called inference. So in other words, when you're presented with information, what do you take home from that information, and how can you be a good consumer? And so these first 2 weeks, we're actually going to focus on what is called human inference. And so we're not going to do a lot of statistical inference. Now, I think everyone would agree that as a society, we place a lot of focus on being literate. So in other words, we say, it's really important that you be able to read. We teach everyone to read, and it makes our lives a lot easier. One thing we don't focus on, though, is how to read numbers, which is its own special skill. So we focus a lot on literacy. And if someone's not literate, they can still get around in the world and do things, but it's much harder if you're not. Well, the same thing goes for numeric literacy. And so these first 2 weeks, that's what we're going to focus on, is starting to help you all get more comfortable with the idea of numeric literacy and being able to look at numbers and claims made about numbers and feel more comfortable about reading them. And if you're more comfortable with that, it's a lot easier in the world to start to critically look at things and critically think about things than if you're not comfortable with looking at stuff like that. And so today, where we're actually going to start with, again, we're going to start with the idea of what's called human inference. And so what we're looking at is when you're presented information, what inference do you make from that initial presentation? And what you're going to find is sometimes when we're presented with information, our initial inference is actually incorrect. And so the first exercise you're going to look at today, you're going to look at an article and you're going to see that the headline for that article claims one thing. But when you actually go through and you read the article, hopefully you're going to see that your initial inference isn't really correct when you really dig into the data and you see what happens. And anymore, understanding this really is crucial. You're presented with so much social media. And I saw a study the other day that said most people, for example, on Facebook, when they go to share an article, a lot of times they'll only read the headline. They don't read the actual article. So we have this tendency, we want to read very short snapshots of things, and then we present that information to other people, and then it grows. And hopefully what you start to see is that's actually a really bad thing to do, because just reading the headline can actually be really misleading. And so that's the first thing that you're going to look at. The next piece that you're going to look at is we're going to look at sometimes when we read numbers, there's been a mistake in the calculation, and that calculation can make a really big difference. And so we're going to look at some examples of misplaced decimal points. And so in the videos you watch today, you're going to see an example of a misplaced decimal point with the Verizon numbers example. And then I've also written some examples in the instructions. Now, I really want to encourage you whenever you work on the worksheets from the workbook So for example, the first worksheets are 1.3 and 1.5. Make sure that you actually click on the assignment and read the directions, because I might not have you do all of the problems in the workbook. So don't jump directly to the workbook. Always make sure to read all the directions on Canvas first, because I'm going to give you some hints. I'm also going to tell you to skip some questions, or I might add some questions in. So always make sure that you do that. Now, if you have any questions over today's work, please use the discussion board. Post those questions. I'll get on there and answer. That way other students can see the replies. And then, if there's something else that you need, just send me an email and I will be more than happy to answer your questions. So I hope you all have a great first day with the material, and I will be here to help.